particularly during the pandemic. It's been great to have these type of solo games. This one just made its fulfillment in the late fall from Van Ryder and has also hit retail. So Final Girl is a solo adventure game where you are the final girl in a horror movie. So classics like Halloween, you are, is it Laurie? I think her name is in the.
I do not know horror movies.
I believe I think it's Laurie because I believe they all call outs to the movies as well. That's the funny thing about this is excited to talk about this game. Neither of us are big horror movie.
Yeah, we
people.
actually were not interested in the game at all because the theme to us is a complete miss.
Yeah, I even when we're very aligned on this. Usually we're not always aligned, but like I like monster movies. I like.
Yeah, I'm not even huge monster movies. I like thrillers.
Thrillers are good too, but like I typically don't gravitate towards slashers, which is this is the main part of the first season of this game is call outs to slashers.
Yep.
So the way the game works is there is a core box where you have your main components and main board for the game, and then the rest of the game is broken out into these episodes or themes where you get a.
So you get a map or a setting or a movie, if you will. So this is like Camp Happy Trails, which is largely considered the base scenario by a lot of people.
It has the easiest map to understand, the easiest killer to understand.
Right, and then a killer.
Yeah, so basically the game works out where you are the girl trying to save the other victims and eventually take on the killer of that scenario. So as Robin mentioned, the first one is Camp Happy Trails.
Yep.
You're going up against this individual named Hans. It very much has the Halloween feel in that box. Sure. So that's the first setting where you're going up against this masked killer who's just pursuing you through a campground. A little bit of a Jason vibe there as well. But again, if we mess up any of the details of horror movies, that's why I have the disclaimer that we are not horror experts. Yeah. But then there's also a Puppet Master, which is very, set on the Puppet Master and the Carnival of Blood. There is a Creech Manor, so like a haunted house poltergeist type scenario. There is also a Nightmare on Elm Street, so a Freddy Krueger scenario. And the last one, which I'm not even sure, it's the Slaughter in the Grove, I think. I'm not sure what that one is supposed to be a call-up to. Again, feel free to put it in the comments if you know what it is.
And forgive us.
Yeah, not our expertise. They do now have a second season out, which I actually know more of those movies.
Yeah, because those are kind of leaning away from the slasher movies and more into just some good monster movies.
Sci-fi, horror, Lovecraftian kind of stuff. So I'm interested to see what those are like as well.
Do you remember when that Kickstarter closes at end of January?
February 3rd.
February 3rd
is when it closes. So it's open now through then. So depending on when you see this, it may still be up.
Yeah. And they'll probably do late pledges. This is a money cow for them. They're gonna almost definitely do late pledges.
This is a huge deal for Van Ryder. So that said, that's basically the theme. In the course of the game, it's built on the same system that they used for their hostage negotiator game.
Oh, interesting. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's basically a system where you have certain action cards that are basically a zero value. You have a resource, which in this game is time, to buy better action cards that you use on your future turns to run around, search for items, attack the killer, save victims.
Yeah, so everything that you do is based off those cards. You can't even move without playing a card that lets you move.
And pretty much everything costs time.
Or in my case, you play a card to let you move, and then you roll the dice, and the dice say, nope. Which they at least give you the, no, you get to move. It just hurts you to move.
Yeah, so it's a very swingy game in that way. But that's basically the theme of Final Girl. As far as themes go, it is right in line with what I feel like they were going for. I mean,
absolutely, they nailed it spot on.
Yeah.
So I just played for the first time, and the fact that Hans doesn't move by default every turn was scarier than if he was chasing me down. I'm like, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
what you doing? Why are you just standing there?
I love a lot of there's elements, and we can jump into talking about gameplay now. Yeah. But there's these great elements in this game of surprise, like in a horror movie, like you don't know what's going to happen through these tarot cards that are revealed or event cards that are revealed. The game is extremely modular. Everything in the game can be mixed up. You can play with a different Final Girl in a different location with different events, different setup,
Right.
different killer in every game. So you have all those elements happening to make the gameplay experience extremely diverse.
Right. So if you have the entire set, you've got a lot of diversity. That's
Five boxes
Yep.
of 5 killers, 5 locations, 5 girls, plus each of those locations has different events, different setup instructions.
Yeah.
That vary because you draw like a card that does, for this scenario, set up the victims.
right. Yeah, that's even the starting conditions where the
all
start,
unique,
where
yeah.
the monster, where the bad guy starts, where the final
victims.
girl starts, where the victims start. So really well done on the modular side of things.
The gameplay is, as I had mentioned already, very swingy though, because there's dice involved, and your ability to. So you're playing cards, but it's not straightforward. You're not like if I played a walk, I then have to roll to see how successfully I do accomplish
Right.
that. So Robin mentioned that you'll still get to move if you fail your roll,
But
you'll
it either
take
dims
damage.
you on time, or it hurts you, or it increases the terror level.
And all of that is kind of a bit of a cascading failure situation.
Yeah.
But there are cards in the game that do
Mitigate
a lot of that risk you have with the dice. So
yeah,
that
I
is,
had that card in my hand pretty much whenever I could, which is you get to re-roll a die. It never helped.
yeah, the critical or close call.
Close call. Yeah, never helped me.
So that can be a little difficult or a little bit frustrating.
Yep.
That said, knowing that Van Ryder has been in the business of creating what we would call more of a
narrative
or story game
driven.
or an experience type game versus a strategy game. There are strategies in this game to help mitigate it, but really it feels like what they were going for is sometimes you're going to live and sometimes you're going to die horribly, like a horror movie.
In my opinion, a mark of a great game, though, is one that does beat you many times and you still want to go back for more. So I don't necessarily take losing a game as a reason to not like a game. Many games that I have played, I lose far more often than I win. And I still really love them because they're fun along the way. And this falls into that category.
That said, I
to
could
a
see
certain
certain
extent.
players getting frustrated with
Sure.
that because it can feel like particularly when you get like Hans, for instance, he gets powered up and he's at the end of his track as they get stronger as you're getting stronger or hopefully you're getting stronger. It can be a little just impossible. Like they're chasing you down, and there's also an interesting horror element that the last life or hit point of the game is a bit of a mystery too, like a horror movie. If you it's for both you as the player and the killer. You get to the last hit point and you reveal it, and they could either just be dead and you succeeded, or you flip it over and they have 3 more life. Is what happened.
So for me, I looked. I had to flip because he beat me down, and I flipped, and it was nothing. And as I was putting the game away, I was like, I'm curious, and I flipped, and it was 2 more life. I'm like, yeah, that tracks.
It's robbed me of a victory a couple times. I've played it many times now, and where I'm down to the end, and I've got like my 1 hit point, and I'm like, if I can kill him,
then you win.
I'll win. But I hit it, and then it's like 3 hit points. I'm like, I can't do that much damage again.
Yep.
So it can be a little brutal in that
Yeah.
way. But again, it's on theme. So that's what you're looking for if you're a fan of horror, or you can at least appreciate that kind of a story experience.
Yeah.
I think that could be interesting. But from a gameplay side, I could see it can be
So where do you
somewhat
land on it?
frustrating. I'm kind of somewhere between like middle and high because I do think it is pretty engaging. It's fun to set up. It's fun
Yep.
to play. The way it's organized out, I'm enjoying it. I just played the and I haven't even played all my season 1 yet. The Creech Manor one, and what I liked about that one is it was less of a punch match between me and the killer. It was trying to cat and mouse, escape this ghost,
Yep.
find this little girl in the house, and be like Poltergeist, and just get out of the house. So it was a
Sure.
little bit more of a new experience. I played these 2, and they're similar, just different. He's more of a tank. This guy has a lot of backup. He's got these little puppets.
Right.
Um,
So I'm going to follow it a mid on it. The swinginess for me. So we've mentioned a couple times on the channel, I don't have good luck with dice. And whereas it does have some mitigation for that, it's still going to be a mid for me because the mitigation, in my opinion, slows down the forward progress because you have to actively take choices that will mitigate that don't necessarily continue moving forward. So you have to take the card that lets you re-roll or something along those lines.
Yeah, and it can be a bit devastating if you spent like your like because time is the resource in the game. You spent your very tight amount of time to get like the search card because you need to get an item because you have nothing to hit it with, and then you botch your roll in the search, and you're like, well, that was.
And the action is still spent, which means that it goes into the discard pile, which then goes back into the pool, and you have to buy it again. It's not a deck building game where you just keep the things that you get to do. They
you lose
go
them.
away.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a mid for me.
Yeah, I'm a mid too right now with that. Next would be accessibility. The rule book is really, I think, great. I think they have a strong rule book. A lot of the gameplay is pretty intuitive, and the iconography to follow is very easy.
Absolutely.
I think that if you've played a lot of solo games, you'll follow along pretty well. But I think there's a lot of rules because there's a lot of modular aspects, which it's like jumping into a game with all of the expansions. So that can be a little difficult if you're not sure like what are the special rules for each location, each killer. So that can be a bit for a newer player, somebody newer to solo games to get into.
Okay. I can see where you're coming from.
Because the base game, he has there's nothing special in this.
Sure, and maybe that's why I'm not as hesitant on it as you are. But I think that they do such a good job of showing you the things, and I mean nothing here is really, in my opinion, that complex of a
I wouldn't call it complex, but I mean it's, or I guess it's inherently complex to add more and more rules.
And we've had this conversation before, and we don't necessarily agree on that. So I personally thought it was very accessible. In fact, I pulled it out this morning beforehand so that I could speak intelligently about this today, and I was up and running within 10-15 minutes. And everything just kind of felt intuitive. There's only one time that I really had to go back to the rule book for something, and that was just because I have a terrible memory.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's the prioritization if it gets down to the wire, because there's like some different rules where it's like, well, you know, if this and this are equal, now you have to go to this. If this, you know, there's some, but that stuff pretty easy to follow along with. For me, it's just as you get into it, again, it's not, it's definitely not tedious, but there's just as you get more and more rules. So for me, it's still a mid for accessibility for those reasons. But a solo gamer that does a lot of this will jump right in. I agree with you.
And I'm going to put it as a high. I don't think it's much of a barrier personally. But tell me down below if you think I'm wrong.
Next would be design. From a design, I think this is a very attractive game. That from the logo really pops and grabs you. The various art styles of the different games, they really capture the different horror movies that they're based on.
Just from a design standpoint too.
Oh,
this is how it works. The boxes come apart
and act as like your map,
and that's your game board. And then they just go click right back in, and that's your storage. And I think that's pretty ingenious. That's whoever designed that.
And the idea was like to have each box look like a VHS, like for an old horror movie. So that was the idea. So you definitely get that. That's a great design idea. Mm-hmm. And to have those pop off and be the game map or the map and the killer's board, it just ends up being like you get a lot out of the real estate of the box of the game. So that is very
very clever,
very very clever indeed.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be a high on design. They did a great job tying everything together. Everything across all the expansions that I've seen, I haven't looked at them personally, but I've seen plenty of images online. All on brand, all on theme. They look like the same game while capturing their own unique flares with the killers and the maps and everything. As I said, the box design is just great. I actually prefer the base game's meeple that come with it for the design as opposed to the upgrades of the miniatures, which is weird for me.
Be one of the few things like I know that like miniatures are eye-catching for Kickstarters, and that's why they a lot of the time exist.
Yep.
I mean, some games need miniatures because it's just that it's about a table presence.
Sure.
I agree with you. Like the miniatures are the only box that I use the miniatures in is the Carnival of Blood, or specifically for the Puppet Master. because I find that tokens are harder to see. His puppets are these little cardboard tokens.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say they don't use the little tracker tokens. That was the only thing that I saw. I didn't get to use it in my gameplay, but there's these tracker tokens that are, I swear, they're the size of a pencil tip.
Those are for certain weapons, I believe.
Okay. They're tiny.
I haven't had to use them yet.
I don't think that they needed to be that small. They could have been the same size as the Bloodlust token.
Yeah, it reminded me almost of the boredom tokens in Dinosaur World, where I'm like, why do they have numbers? Like, just be little gray cubes.
Yeah, because
we'll talk about that another.
Yep, we'll do another video on that.
But the same idea, where I'm like this.
This is ridiculously tiny. It couldn't have saved that much money.
No. So anyways, the only one I use the miniatures in, but I could, as I mentioned before, I could have proxied it with anything, or have it been a cube.
Yep.
Like, and I would have been fine with it. But I agree, the little meeple of the murderer and the girl and the victims, that's all I use. And I have the miniature set.
Right.
Which I even took the 3 puppets out and I just put them in the box with him.
Box. Yeah, but design's going to be an absolute high for me.
I agree. It's a very attractive game. And I think that's a big reason why it's so popular to discuss online. I know people have very polarizing opinions about it, but I think
either you like swingy games or you don't. I'm fine with swingy games, especially when the gameplay around the swinginess is fun, and that's the case for this one.
And especially in a game where it's, again, we've talked about this with solo games, where it's a win condition versus score.
Yep.
Like a swingy score game is like why versus like win condition. I'm like, all right, I win or I lose. And this one again is trying to tell a story. Van Ryder Games trying to tell a story. It's a bit of a choose your own path kind of a game.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep.
So that's my thoughts on design as well. I agree with you.
Yep.
Next would be quality. Everything in the game is pretty solid quality. The cards, the components.
Yeah.
I almost wish, my only thing that I would say that I think they could have done with these boxes is you could have had a custom cut wooden meeple for each killer in the box.
Sure. Yep.
I think that's something I would have added to it to give it a little bit more oomph, especially when you're paying like $20 a box for these expansions.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that.
And that would give it just a little bit more edge to each box, because when you go inside some of these, like there's a lot on the location side. Like there's a ton of more stuff in this, like as far as cards and content. When you get into a lot of the killers, it's his terror deck. Yeah. It's his terror deck, and like he has puppets, but like most of the killers have a deck of cards.
Right.
So I just feel like that's one thing they could have done on quality to really solidify it for me. Sure. But again, everything else is really good quality components. The core game has some great quality components. That's where I land with that.
Yeah, so I'd say it's just like slightly below high for me. It's like it's a high, but it's like there's things that could have made it better, but I mean it's marginal.
Yeah. And then finally is value. And this
is a complex one.
This is the controversial part of this game. So I think we both agree that it was a little odd the way they decided to go forward with this, but as far as how they released the game in so much content at a time, and in the way they did it, Van Ryder Games. I've seen a lot of talk on the Facebook discussions, threads, about how that, you're getting a core box, which I actually don't have right in front of me right now, but the core box is essentially the same size.
Right.
It gives you everything you need as far as tokens for most of the game. It gives you your base cards.
Yep, your base cards, your
rule book, everything that
all your meeples, all your tokens, which I
your
just
player
them
board
out, and I could have sworn that I was missing one of. So there's the 3 cardboard like rectangles for victim stuff, and I could have sworn there was a circle for each of those. I searched for like 15 minutes because I thought I dropped it on the floor, and then I counted out the holes I punched out versus the tokens, and no, they just didn't have one. I'm like, oh, cool.
So that one base is like $20 retail. But you cannot play a game with that core box.
Right. There's no story in there. There's no game in there. There's not even a game. Like there's no map.
You have nothing to play. You can't play a game.
Right.
So you would need at least one of these the movie boxes, or I think they call them feature film. You need a feature film.
Yeah.
To play the game. Now that has frustrated a lot of people, both players and retailers, because as Rob had, sorry if I'm tapping there, Rob had mentioned
a lot of retailers
offline,
are commenting online that they're a little bit frustrated because they have stacks of these feature films, but they have no core boxes, so they're essentially unsellable. Which does happen a lot with any game that has expansions. Like another game we're looking for right now is Sleeping Gods, and I'm finding the expansions places, but there's no base game, so they're just going to sit on the shelves. This is just a little bit more because 90% of the games are expansion. You've got
you can't
5
play,
expansions and 1 core box.
That said, so like the criticism there, the feedback is it was a little clumsy to do that. Where the solution I had mentioned before we were recording today was that if they had like Camp Happy Trails is most people what's recommended to start with, because it's not the easiest killer, but he's the most basic killer. He doesn't have a lot of special abilities. He just is there to kill you. They all are, but he just walks at you.
That's literally what he does. He walks at you and he stabs you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. He swings a hammer, yeah.
That, in my opinion, should have been the combination with the core box. So at least I could buy Camp Happy Trails with that, and then I'd have a core box.
Right.
I don't have a problem with the other feedback. Some people think the game is overpriced. I don't think the game is overpriced.
Not at all.
I think from a value side, if that had been the case, where that had come with the core box, problem solved. Because then basically the rest of the game is, if that game had come out, Final Girl, with that one scenario, that one girl, for $40, I would have bought it, I would have enjoyed it, and I think other people would have felt the same. Basically what we got was a front-loaded series of expansions for the game. So I think you would have spent $100 on the other 4 features and that game, and it would have been totally worth it, or $120. Yeah. It would have been, it still is, I think, completely worth it for that content.
Yeah, so I think the value is spot on for me. I think that this is totally a $40 game. I just from playing it this morning, it is a quick game, but I really enjoyed playing it. It's definitely got the value. I think it was more of a marketing snafu than it was a value snafu. It was a little bit clumsy, and it's gotten a lot of gripes because of that, but it doesn't bother us. But that could be because we're used to dumping hundreds of dollars on games, so it doesn't bother us at all. But
if you wanted to try the game out, like I do feel like there's nothing wrong with, if you did see the core box at retail, grabbing it and grabbing one of the scenarios that comes to you. I think I get what they were going for. They wanted a modular experience. You can get whatever you wanted.
Right.
You could jump in. But the problem is like, I think a lot of people have FOMO and they get frustrated that it's so much to get the experience.
And I assume theoretically they printed 5 times as many core boxes as they did expansions.
I think what's happening though, or maybe happening, is you're having a person just buy a core box, or one person goes like all in, kind of like I did, and then like Rob, you buy a core box and then you borrow the features because it makes sense.
So I'm part of the problem.
but that's, I mean, if you want to get into it, like if you have friends, you don't all need a copy of every feature film,
right?
Unless you're aggressively playing this game. And then if you're the friend who's aggressively playing it, maybe you go in, or maybe you buy it together. Like it's, but I do think you're going to get the mileage out of the game because of how modular it is. But I think it's fair for people to be frustrated with how it's been put together. But personally, I am enjoying it, and I'm more excited to have more of the horror monster feeling that they're doing in their second season. So I am going to be, or I am already backing the feature films.
Yeah, and I didn't think that I was going to, because I was like, the theme really doesn't catch me at all, and the gameplay can't be that fun. But I really enjoyed it this morning, so I'll play it a few more times. But I'm really considering picking up at least a couple of the second season. I think the value is a high for me. I really do. Marketing aside, and the clumsiness of the publishing aside, it just doesn't faze me. It's an optics thing, and get over it.
We're not here to spend your money though either. Like, if you're just interested, get a couple. Or back, if you're gonna back season 2, just do a core box and like one thing. It's pretty. As far as Kickstarter goes, it's also very modular. You don't have to. You can do whatever you want. It's a la carte, which is
But I know
nothing wrong with that.
a lot of people are searching for this. My recommendation is first things first. Go search your friendly local game store.
Absolutely.
That's where I picked mine up. They had a whole stack of them. In fact, they still had some core boxes when we went the other day.
Yeah, they
some
still
retailers
have
just
quite
have a
few.
ton.
Yeah.
Online, it's gone. You're not going to find it online.
Yeah, the convenience of it, particularly in the pandemic. I think most
Yeah.
people are just buying more online, but
Yep.
I was successful, or I got mine early. But like I think when I bought mine online,
I'm pretty sure within a half hour it was gone.
Yeah, that or the next day it was entirely gone, and I was like, oof, okay.
Yeah. So where does that? Where do you land for it on the
I'm
whole?
landing at a 4 out of 5, so that's 4.0 out of 5. And my main things were the gameplay can be a little. I still enjoy it, but I could see it being frustrating for some people, and I think just there's a lot going into it. And I probably am strongly influenced by the value conversation, even though I think it's still a high value game.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna put it at a 4.5 out of 5, which kind of surprised me when I was coming across it. Gameplay again for me is the swinginess and the lack of forward when you have to mitigate is meh for me. Accessibility didn't bother me at all. I think it's a highly accessible game because I think they did a great job explaining it in the rules. And there's the everywhere, like on the back of the rule book and on the actual player mat, there is the steps of each round that you have to play. So I think they did a great job at mitigating any difficulties. So it'll be a 4.5 for me.
Well, I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
From Van Ryder Games, I'm glad this is so successful for them. I've liked their games.
Yeah, we've
several of their
spoken
books
before about their book style games. It's a pick your path graphic novels type thing. Take a look at those. Those are cool.
And looking forward to the second season as well, and
Sure.
what is going to be coming along with that. So really enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoy yourself, and best of luck on your future board game adventures.
And thank you for joining us on ours.